In the spirit of Halloween, paranormal or not, what is the scariest, creepiest, or most unsettling experience of your life? Growing up, my bedroom was the only one that faced the front of the house/street. When I was about 8 or 9, I woke up to my dad calmly but firmly telling me to get up, go in the bathroom, and shut the door. I was annoyed because I was half asleep, but I listened. Apparently, I was more tired than I realized because I fell asleep on the bathroom floor. The next morning, I asked my mom what happened. She seemed oblivious and confused. I looked at my dad like she was crazy, and I asked him why he had woken me up, and he denied doing it. I was becoming frustrated to the point of tears, but I ultimately let it go. Fast forward to college. I was home one break, and I decided to ask again. I had thought of that night off and on for years, and it still bothered me. This time, my dad goes, "Huh. I was wondering if you even remembered that." Turns out that a lot of houses on our block were being vandalized and robbed all those years ago. Someone had broken into the garage and was inside the house. My room was partially over the garage. My dad heard it happen and quietly got me to safety. Police were called, the guy ran. However, he was never caught, and my parents didn't want a terrified kid on their hands, so for years, they pretended like nothing had ever happened. It wasn't supernatural, but it was unsettling for sure. When I was a kid, I woke up in the middle of the night to my bed shaking. Normally that would scare the crap out of me, but instead, I was just kind of annoyed. I rolled over and muttered, "Stop it." The shaking stopped immediately. Then a male voice speaks right beside me, saying, "Sorry." That's when I freaked out. I'm pretty sure my childhood house was haunted. When I was 16 in the mid-90s, aka the I know everything, I'm invincible, and you can't stop me age, I got in a fight with an acquaintance while a whole bunch of us were hanging out at his house. Stupid fight, can't remember what about, but I decided fuck it, I was going home. I lived about 5 miles away, but I didn't have a car, and since it was 2 a.m., there were no buses. I was going to walk home, in the middle of the night, though a not as safe as it seemed neighborhood, as a tiny 16-year-old girl. So, I did. I think, in hindsight, my friends either didn't believe I was going to do it or were too startled by the sudden argument to realize what I was doing. I left the house and started hoofing it. About a mile out, the suburban housing neighborhood melted into the main street, with highway access. I started to notice a grayish minivan following me. It would follow me, pass me, turn a corner, and about 3 blocks later, it would do the same thing. I mean, really obvious what it was doing. I crossed over to the other side of the street, so I was walking the opposite of traffic flow, and thus no car could come up behind me. It kept doing it on the other side of the street. About a mile later, there was a 24-hour Fred Meyer, West Coast USA chain grocery/all-purpose store, lights bright but the parking lot empty-ish. I immediately crossed the parking lot and went to head inside. Just before I got to the doors, the minivan that had been following me, pulled up into one of the parking spots. A guy called out from the driver's side and said, "I don't want you to walk over here, just stay there and listen. I just wanted to let you know what I was doing. I saw you walking a while back, but I also saw a dark car that was following you. A couple of times, you went to turn around or stopped, so it started following you down a parallel side street. When I saw it, I started to follow you both, just to make sure you were safe. Go inside the store, and call someone to come pick you up, please. I haven't seen the car since you headed across the lot." He waited until I was inside the store and then pulled away. I didn't have anyone to call, so I just let the night cashier know what was going on and hung out with her for about an hour and a half. Then I finished the walk home. I've never forgotten the incident, or that man, whoever he was. During the walk, I never saw the dark car he mentioned, but I've always been convinced he saved my life that night. Not to me, but to my sister. She and her husband had just had their first child a few months prior. My brother-in-law was working the graveyard shift at his job as my sister stayed home taking care of my nephew. Around 2 a.m., she heard a loud knocking on her back door. She went to check it out and saw a lady banging on the door, asking for my sister to let her in. The lady told my sister that her husband had just beat her down the street and was looking for her. My sister was hesitant to let her in since she had a newborn in the house and didn't want to interfere. She told the lady that the best she could do was call the police for her. The lady told my sister to not call the police and to let her in. This is where my sister got suspicious. She went to get her phone and called 911. When she went back to the door, the lady was gone. The police arrived a few minutes later, and they told my sister that the same situation happened a few streets down. Apparently, the couple would do this act to get into people's homes. I'm sure this is very common, but having it almost happen to my sister and my nephew just creeps me out. Some real Clockwork Orange shit. I was home alone once when my parents were out of town. We had just moved into our house, so there was an empty lot next to our house, with a house half built. My parents were the type to leave the outdoor side garage door unlocked. Dumbasses, I know. Well, while they were gone, I was watching TV, and all of a sudden, the door that leads into my garage from the inside started to wiggle. I put my TV on mute, and I listen again. I see it actually move that time. I start freaking out, and I'm kind of in shock, looking for the phone. I can't find the house phone, so I search for my cell. Remembered I left my charger in my parents' car, so I'm frantically looking for the house phone. Our house was so new, my mom hadn't even put blinds or drapes up in the kitchen or living room. Well, whoever was wiggling my garage doorknob starts banging on the windows in my living room. Again, no blinds or phone, and at that moment, I realize this guy is seeing my every move, so I shoot upstairs. Again, I was looking frantically for the phone and trying to figure out how and where I'd jump out of my house to get away from the maniac outside my house if I needed to. He then starts pounding on my front door. I can tell at that point, he's using something metal or plastic by the sound of the thumps. I really thought he was going to shoot my door open. I remember at that moment, I was pissed at myself for being a dumbass teenager that frequently talked on the phone because I always just left it lying around, never putting it back on the base. I wanted so badly to push the button that detects where my house phone is, but I thought if he heard where it was, he'd break the window nearest to it and take it. I then remembered I left the phone in my mom's room, and as I passed the hallway to her room, I saw two people pacing in front of my house. I'm freaking out, trying to find my dad's gun in my parents' bedroom. I found the phone and called 911. As I'm on the phone, the window breaks. I'm upstairs and am scared to death. Suddenly everything goes silent. I'm waiting in my parents' pitch black closet for what seems like an eternity, then I hear the sirens. Cops show up, but there is no one to be found. I figured that they hadn't gone too far since it had just occurred. Cops never found my tormentors. On the plus side, the company building the house next door, the same company that built ours, hired overnight security to stay on our street until the house was built, which was definitely refreshing. One night, about 10 months ago, there was a pretty heavy snowstorm in my area. All of the roads were closed, and a curfew was issued for everybody except emergency medical personnel. I had been shoveling snow for most of the day and was dead tired come nightfall. Didn't have the energy to do much of anything besides eat dinner and lay down. I fire up some OG Star Trek and begin to doze off. A couple of hours later, around 1 a.m., I hear the sound of a door rattling and a slight whisper saying my name, Vladimir. I sit up a bit and realize it's coming from my parents' room, becoming fainter with the passing time. After 10 minutes or so, I gather up the courage to see what the hell is going on. Shitty folding knife in hand, I peek out into the hallway and don't see anything. The noise is still coming from the room next door, the rattling becoming more rushed as I approach. Cautiously, I open the door and sneak inside. It's pitch black, and I can't see anything. My eyes are taking entirely too long to adjust to the darkness. I'm shuffling forward, and all of a sudden, something grabs and pulls on my leg. At this point, I was so freaked out I jumped back. As the whispers continued, I recognized my dad's voice. He was asking me for help. He had a stroke while walking to use the bathroom around 1 a.m. that night. After he fell, he could use his left foot to rattle the door to his bathroom. My mom fell asleep on the couch in the living room and wasn't around to help or hear. I was able to grab the house phone and call 911, and despite the weather, the police and an ambulance arrived within 10 minutes. That was the scariest night of my life. The doctors told us there wasn't much hope for my dad before going into surgery, since he had a hemorrhagic stroke and there was a massive amount of bleeding. Fast forward 10 months, and my old man is cognitively the same, just paralyzed on his right side. He had every infection under the sun while in the hospital, but he staved them off and is still with us today. He was my best friend before the incident and my hero after. When I was around 16, my rapidly growing family finally moved from the house I had spent my entire life in. As you would expect, we spent a lot of time fondly remembering things we used to do in the house as we were packing everything up. At some point, I decided to go into the downstairs closet with a flashlight and read, something I used to do when I was younger to get some peace and quiet. Now, this is one of those deep closets that goes under the stairs. It went back around 8 feet and then had a left turn into a very low, maybe 3-foot high space. This space was largely occupied by a mountain of old blankets and stuffed animals. Of course, this is the fluffiest spot to sit and read. About an hour in, I shift a little to get comfortable, and I hear a low, slow, warped, hoarse voice says, "You always make me happy." I flipped my shit, hit my head on the low ceiling, and practically broke the door down getting out. After hyperventilating and explaining to my family why there was no color left on my face, I went back to see what it was. It was my little stuffed bear from when I was 3 or 4 years old that I happened to lean on just right to press his belly. When I pressed his stomach again, though, nothing. This poor bear I hadn't played with since I was a toddler used the last of its power, used its dying breath to tell me I made it happy. "You make me happy too, little bear, when you're not making me piss myself." I've had multiple times when I've woken up in the middle of the night and was sure I could see a figure in my room until I turned on my bedside light. Usually, this scares me a bit, but my most memorable one was waking up thinking I saw some short figure at the end of my bloody bed and saying, "Duck off, I'm trying to sleep," then returning to burying my face into the comfort of my pillow. Seems like it worked. On my previous job, when our building was still under construction, the only floors that were occupied were the 1st, 2nd, 5th, 6th, and 7th. One time, I was alone inside the elevator going from 1st to the 6th floor when suddenly it stopped and opened on the 3rd floor. Normally, I would just disregard it, but rumors were all over that a ghost child was playing around on the vacant floors. So I pressed the closed button as fast as I could. When it closed, I heard noises like someone was tapping their fingers on the elevator walls.